Hi, everybody. It's Chris Herbert with another episode of Pricing Talk. Today, I've got Barry Carmel with me. She's got a lot of retail and food pricing experience, as well as a number of other areas she can kind of dive into as well. So, Barry, thanks for joining me and coming to talk some pricing.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, given kind of, your experience and your 10 plus years as a VP of pricing, what were you kind of seeing, over that time, kind of the evolution of pricing in the retail industry and beyond?
Yeah, it's really interesting. The last 10 years, especially, I think even in the last couple of years, we used to be the people pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, and we were doing pricing. And due to some real, blunders by some people, we've gotten, a little more in the forefront. Then it's become much more public. I mean, everybody's talking about dynamic pricing and surge pricing in a way that is really negative without really understanding what it is. So it used to be behind the scenes. I think inflation has made that worse as well. People have become super sensitive to price changes, and, lots of people who know nothing about it are talking about it. So yeah, it's been a wild ride just the last couple of years, really post-pandemic through all of this. But I think the tech is so much better than it used to be. Because when I started doing pricing, when I started, we were using Lotus 1, 2, 3. Let's get serious. Like, that's how long ago I started doing this kind of stuff. But we did everything in Excel-based spreadsheet passing. And now the tools are as varied as a very small plug and play to really sophisticated, customizable tools as well. Yep. And so that's way better than it ever was before. It used to be, we just sort of guessed. I think the only other thing, though, that I'm afraid is being lost a little is that pricing is in black and white, and it's a balance of art and science. And I think some of the art is lost when you get too deep into the technicality of pricing. I think there's a lot of deeply technical pricers talking deeply technical stuff that doesn't reflect the reality of what a retailer in particular has to go through.
Well, I think it's interesting kind of what you said about, I think kind of almost the dangerous part of too many people getting involved involved or curious about pricing, which I'm sure, with having your roles and kind of dealing with so many high level people probably gets in the way a little bit, or can be more of a hassle than a good thing at times, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think that pricing, that people, they sort of think they know the basics: buy low, sell high. It is like, it's not that hard. It shouldn't be that hard, but there is a lot of gray area in the work that you do. So it's similar to, I've talked to marketing people say everybody thinks they know what marketing is. Well, everybody thinks they know what pricing is. And everyone doesn't actually know what pricing is. So so you do get a lot of people at the higher levels who think they know, and very rarely have they ever actually done the pricing work, and certainly not at the scope and scale that today's retailers are doing it, where it's multi-channel, full life cycle pricing. From new item setup, how do you set the base price, where should it go, to things as fundamental as should it be line priced, and how do you set those? They don't even understand those basics. And then all the way through, how do you promote effectively and efficiently through clearance and the end? That's all become a pricer's job, is to know full life cycle, what to do with products and when's the right time to make moves on prices. So lots of people think they know, and they don't. That's it. They just don't. I don't know. I'm just not gonna sugarcoat it. There's just lots of people who think they know. And for all the pricers who hear this, I hope you feel joy knowing that you're right. They don't know what they're talking about. That's a whole thing to deal with. But
it's funny sometimes, even the pricing people I'm talking to, I'm like, that's a little concerning of your take on things too.
Well, and I just gave you the example, but I won't name names, but I just had a conversation with somebody talking about making a price change, and they're showing me the projection of what the price change is going to do, but they hadn't taken any elasticity into consideration. But they call themselves a pricer. I'm like, that's fundamental. And that was the tool's fault that they had chosen and that they were using, that it didn't consider in the tool. And that's, yes, you call yourself a pricing person, that's great. But these are the things, the nuances of pricing that actually really matter.
And I don't know if you've seen this, but I feel like a lot of the tools now are just, and maybe some of the older ones, maybe they've gotten better now, but I've heard a lot of complaints about the tools always just saying increase price, no matter what, just increase. They're like set on default of just increase the price and you'll be better off.
Yeah, look, there's always a bias of people around pricers to increase. But as I was telling a friend of mine that I was doing this podcast, I said, and I was talking about things that get my goat. Like right now, dynamic pricing is one of those things that the whole argument, the conversation's turned into it's surge pricing, because it's not. Because anyone who's actually doing dynamic pricing knows that 75% of the time you're lowering a price, not raising it. So when tools are leading towards the bias of raising prices, they're leaving out that art piece of it, which is you can't universally say raise prices. It's what does that product do in your total portfolio about whether or not you can raise the price. So if you're Uber, it's pouring rain, its traffic is congested, go ahead, surge. But Walmart can't do it. You know, most retailers can't just arbitrarily say, I'm going to raise prices. It just doesn't work that way, especially if the items are strategic in nature and set your price impression and have a halo effect on the whole company for what it is. So I agree with you that a lot of tools lean towards that bias of raise. It's not always the right thing to do.
Definitely agree. Well, I kind of like to go back and forth between some of that stuff and then some of the career stuff. So what do you think that means for, pricing professionals that are getting their career started or moving up? What skills, other than becoming maybe an expert on one specific software, kind of would you recommend people, outside of the Excel world learn, or, is it soft skills?
You have, sure. The most important soft skill is to learn the business and to understand that it is not a black and white world, especially to merchants. So if you want to be a really good partner with your merchants, we're talking in retail, there's always a merchant, a category manager, buyer, call them whatever, but the merchant involved, they have the product knowledge, you have the technical knowledge. Between the two of you is the solution. But if you don't learn to understand that gray area and start to function in gray area with comfort of, yes, Barry, you're right, but, and then when they say the but, then so learn to appreciate and learn their business, but also learn when to sniff out what you're actually facing is change resistance, because there's really two different things. So one is learn about the business so you can speak to the business and understand the business. That is what makes you the most valuable. And I've always said it that the best pricing relationships I've ever had, the pricing team owned the pricing decision, but the merchandisers thought they did. Those are the best relationships I've ever had. So I'll say it again. The pricing team owned the decision, but my team's partnership with the merchants enabled the merchants to believe they owned the decision, that they had the power to say no, even though they really didn't. But it was because the way we counseled and advised them that they always made the decision we wanted them to make. Not always, there were moments, but that's the healthiest way that it looks going forward. So to build the relationship. So one, learn the business. Two, also learn change resistance, because you will definitely, absolutely, positively, especially early in your career and at companies where pricing as a strategic function, lots of people have pricing departments, but their pricing execution, but pricing as a strategic function is new, then you will hit all kinds of change management problems.
I was going to ask, what's the different, and this is a poll I may put up here soon, is which department is usually the most resistant in the retail world to pricing changes?
The merchants probably are the most resistant. I've been at more than one company where every conversation is about gross margin percent. Gross margin percent, that's all they talk about. My markup is 50%, my markup is 65, my markup's 25. I don't care what the number is, but they're all talking about percents. Yeah. And so I would take an item and say, I want to lower the price by $30. It's a $130 item and I'm going to take it down to $99 because that's where the market is and that's where we need to go. And the merchant would say, they'd get out their little calculator and they'd say, well, that's only 22% margin. I can't work on 22% margin. And then I do the math test. Feel free to steal the math test, people. And the math test is this. Would you rather have 10% of 100 or 50% of 10. Go.
Yeah.
They will not fail the test. If they fail the test, they really shouldn't have the job, but they shouldn't fail the test. And that is, you have to give them the crystallizing example of how to change their thinking to say, I never thought, they literally just never thought of it that way. They were trained their whole lives and they were measured on their margin percent and they never were measured on their margin dollars. So that's where you will feel a lot of merchant resistance when you do certain conversations, but use the test and make sure that it will crystallize in their head that they would take 10% of 100 over 50% of 10. If it was their paycheck all day, every day, they'll take $10 over $5. That's it. That's basically the difference. So you have to help them see that, and you have to give them simple crystallizing examples to get them through the change management. You can't show them the big spreadsheet of all the math about why you know it's right. Simple crystallized examples to help them through.
I'm sure those conversations are fun to.
Well, and you know what? There's one other team that's very resistant, and that's store operations. And their resistance is about the labor expense of making the changes. So you'll have conversations, and anybody who was doing this job in 22, in late 21 and early 22 knows that the need to put through price changes because of the rapid pace of cost increases, because this 8-9% that they talked about in the news, we all know that's not what was happening. It was 20 and 30% multiple times in a year. So you had to move very quickly. Store operations would say, I have 2 labor hours a week for pricing. And and the way they calculate their labor is, whatever. And they're like, you can do 200 price changes a week. Right. But I need to do 20,000 approximately. Can we do 20,000? And the answer is always no. So, but again, when you understand their business and the way they run their business and what they're doing, store operations will actually support you, especially when you can put an ROI behind it. So you can say, and then together you go to leadership and say, we need to put through 5,000 price changes in 2 weeks. Therefore, I need an extra 40 hours per store, which will cost X number of dollars. So just pick a number, say it's going to cost you $100,000, but the ROI is that we're losing money every time we sell one of these. So it pays itself back. So you can do that. But so store operations is resistance to change in depth in the frequency of price changes. They don't like it. It messes with their model. But in retail, labor is typically the most expensive line on the P&L. So get to know your store operations partners very, very well, because they will enable your success unless you're Walmart and you go all digital shelf tags.
And that was actually going to be my question. I see that more in Europe. Like, what is
all over Europe?
What is the reason that the U.S. hasn't cut labor?
Well, the U.S. hasn't. No, the U.S. hasn't done it because it's expensive. Yeah. Like, it's very, very expensive. And there's also issues. There's technical issues behind the scenes because we did a test when I was at Bed Bath. We tested electronic shelf labels. Mm-hmm. What we were trying to do was have the same price in the store as the price that was online, because online we're reflecting in dynamic real time, and in the stores, we have to get 3 weeks out and schedule the price change. And by the time we've changed the price, it's different again. So we tested it. So, but it's the expense of those tags. Those tags are very expensive. They need that hockey stick, which for you guys watching me, the hockey stick would look like that. The hockey stick has to happen for the cost of the tags to come down. So I consider Walmart the hockey stick, and it's going to disrupt, it's going to change everything, because then suddenly tags can be mass produced, brought over by container loads, to the United States. And then suddenly the cost of the tag going from $1 a tag, which is outrageous. If you think about 2,300 stores for Walmart, they probably have 100,000 SKUs at least per store. Just think about that cost per store of what they have to do. It's outrageous. So the ROI is very hard to prove out before. That's always been the issue.
So we're gonna go into the store tag business. All right.
Yeah. Listen. Yeah. Too late. It's already been commoditized. It's done. It was special. They're already making them all over the country, all over the world, and every place we can't keep up. So no, I'm not going into the store tag business. And there are places that have long since been in the tag, like Best Buy has had all of their appliance business. Home Depot, Lowe's, they've all been doing it in their appliance business for that exact reason, for the prices online to be able to match. But there's an issue also with the syncing to the front register. So with those tags, so you may be able to signal to the tag and change the price, but can you sync to the register at the same time? Because sometimes, this is the analogy we use at Bed Bath, you are putting the pig through the python. And if you try to push this huge pile of price changes down in the middle of the day, you'll break the POS system. So it'll freeze the POS system. Then you can't take any money and sell anything, which is not the point of being in retail. So it has to be synced before the store opens.
Yep.
So it depends on how frequently the feed can go down to the store. So there's a lot of technical lift. I know everybody's like, oh, they're pretty, they're great, because they are pretty and they are great. But there's a lot of technicality behind making it happen. I mean, we had a huge IT group of people just to run the test to do it.
Interesting. So in Europe, are they just doing less dynamic and it's more just
a total labor savings? Yes, it's 47 euros and that's what the price is, and they leave it for the day, and they may leave it for the week, whatever. But and a lot of retailers have very legacy old systems, and anybody who thinks they doesn't actually understand retail. But they do have a lot of legacy systems. I joke that somebody has to, feed the hamster to keep him running on the wheel, or the whole system's going to shut down. So they can't necessarily take that kind of a change and there was one point, since they're out of business now, I can tell the story. There was one point where we had sent so much information down. We had locked the Bed Bath & Beyond system up. It was almost 72 hours. There were soulmates of mine after that. We didn't sleep for 3 days. It was actually the longest 3 days of my life when they were, in the store with calculators and the coupon and doing, because we had frozen the system. The pig was too big for the python, and we broke it. And I think Walmart just had an outage and someone's suing them about it. Like it's bad. Like when that happens, it is a crisis. You have a responsibility not to break things.
Wow. I see it. And I didn't, although I do recruit for the roles, I still don't know all the technical stuff behind the behind the scenes and the systems on the retail side compared to the B2B.
And I'll take it back I'll go back to that while we talk about retail again. And you talked about early pricers. What do you need to know? You need to know your partners, but you really need to know your tech. Like, you have to understand how a price change gets made. What are the fields? What are the capabilities? It's a lot. I mean, and knowing that your IT partner is your partner, not your enemy, because you can end up in a place where your IT partner is your enemy, where they don't want to ever do anything that you want to do. I've had both experiences. I've had the most, my partners at Bed Bath, we said we're not using names, so I won't shout out by name, but they know who I'm talking. They will know I'm talking about them. We're the most wonderful partners. We changed everything together, and we considered each other an extension of each other's teams. We were 100% in sync for every change we wanted to make. I could ask her to reprioritize what I needed, and she could ask me to reprioritize because she had other maintenance and things she needed to do. So, but they taught me everything about what I needed to know about how to be a really good pricing partner. They taught me. I didn't teach them.
Yeah, some of those people, I mean, and too often I think we get into adversarial relationships when we're trying to do too much and trying to push things that, haven't been done in an organization before.
Yeah, and I had great advice from an architect I worked with in a stint in food service distribution. He'll know who it is, who I'm talking about if he watches this, who said to me, stop asking me for a report and tell me the problem you're trying to solve. So when I started thinking of him as my partner to problem solve is when we could change the world. But when I kept going at him saying, well, I need this, this, and this, he goes, stop. You don't need that. You need to tell me the problem you need to solve. But he was great because he understood the business. So he taught me what I needed to know about IT, but he already understood the business. It made the dialogue really useful.
Nice. All right. Well, that may be one of the things you look for in the next question, but a lot of people liked your response on the LinkedIn post from last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever we released this. But maybe we can get into, what you look for when you're taking a new role. And I know we've had this conversation probably a few times over the years, but for pricing people taking a new role or maybe being the first person in, what do you look for when you're kind of evaluating a company as far as, is it worth your time or worth your investment?
Yeah, number one, the question is the job strategic, or is the job to do what I'm told. Because Chris, you know me well enough. Anybody who knows me watching this knows that telling me what to do is not a good result. Like it's not the right fit for me. So if you are an experienced pricer going into stand up new pricing work, you need to really ask questions about what do they think needs to be done and why are they hiring a pricing person now? Why are they putting focus on a strategic pricing initiative? And I think you should ask the question, is this a strategic pricing initiative or am I actually just running the pricing operations team? Because I bet you don't actually know that sometimes when you see posts on jobs, whether it's strategic or functional in nature. And you can end up with both. I had both. I've had both more than once. I like having both together because then you can make sure you can execute the strategy and the vision. So asking questions, why now? And asking the boss or the person, the hiring manager, what they think they know. If you're new to pricing, don't go to a place without an established pricing practice. That you don't want to do. If you are an experienced pricer, then you know those things you've tripped over and you have to think about where those problems have been in the past, where they're like, oh, we're straight margin percent. That, I don't know what you're talking about. If you're in doing retail accounting, also affectionately referred to as monkey math, you are managing markdown. You're not actually managing margin. You're actually just managing markdown, which is a whole, you ask those questions. If you know what those pitfalls are, you have to ask about them because there is nothing worse than discovering how bad of a decision you've made once you're there. And it's just not what you think it's going to be. I think you have to look for cultural fit. Is your boss, the person, the hiring manager, are they analytical? Are they technical? Are they totally theoretical? Do they dot I's and cross T's or not? And is that going to be the right person for you? And I would certainly want to ask questions about their leadership style, because if you're the first pricer, the first person in, you need a manager who's going to believe that you are the bee's knees and they're going to stand up for you no matter what. Like they have to have your back. So you need to have some really transparent conversations. It can be incredibly frustrating to be the first person in. I did a consulting gig and they basically had no pricing. And they thought they wanted a pricer. And then so I did all the work and I told them what the strategy should be and all the things that they should do. And they were like, no, it was just so expensive. I actually told them, I didn't tell them to raise prices. I told them to lower. I said, you have to lower dramatically. Your volume will lift, but it won't happen immediately. Then you need a marketing campaign to announce your new lower prices and your new value proposition. And this, and this, and the price tag is like $22 million. And they're like, no. I mean, I got paid. I was a consultant. I got paid anyways. But can you imagine being the person who went into the job? Which unfortunately I did put two people I really like and respect into those roles, and they're living it every day now. So,
I'm sure you're getting lots of fun text messages or.
Nope. So, they went into they don't have the appetite for it. So I'd say it's a perfectly fair question when someone says, because I think you'll find a lot of people, to your point earlier, Chris, who are putting strategic pricing in for the opportunity to raise prices. Maybe the right question to ask is, and what if I discover that the right thing to do is lower prices? What's going to happen? Maybe you ask that question up front because they'll give you verbal clues. They'll say, we should raise prices. I think there's money there. Do we change our rounding? Whatever those things are, that'll lead to you to believe that what they want is higher prices and higher margin percent. And you need to remind them your job is more margin dollars, not rate. Because rate doesn't go in the bank, dollars go in the bank.
That I think is a great question because, I think a lot of times, I think the tough part is to read between the lines of like, is this an operational role? Is it a strategic role? Like you said, what's that commitment? What's that style? But I think the asking, I think it's figuring out what those questions are that that help you determine the difference between those. Going
back to what I said about the best relationships I've ever had is who owns the pricing decision. Because am I going to have the authority to do certain things to prove that I'm right or not? Am I going to say do this and then someone's going to always say no? When am I going to have the power to make that decision? So I think, what happens if I recommend lowering a price? What will they say? Hey, do I get to try this? And can I prove it? Can I prove it or not? Or are you just going to say no to everything? You don't want to be there.
Yeah, no, I think that's another great one is like who do I have to win over to just get a price change or
Right.
a price test? How many, is it a committee? Am I setting up the committee? Like who are those, who are those people and are they on board? And I always recommend everybody try to talk to as many people as they can and understand sometimes not who you're talking to, but who you're not talking to, because they may be trying to hide the person who's going to be your biggest adversary once you start. And
Yep.
you're going to need to spend the most time with that person trying to win them over.
Yep.
So I know we've got a lot of stories about interviews over our years of of friendship. But and we won't go into, like you said, we won't go to anyone's names, but maybe any interview advice or things particular you look for when you're interviewing candidates. And I won't ask you to give away your specific question that I know that I know you like to ask.
No, I have a couple. Yeah. So for me, when I am interviewing for a role or interviewing candidates, the number one thing for me is fit. Do I feel connected to this person's energy? Not kidding. Like, I know that sounds like flaky because and anyone knows me knows I'm not flaky, but I have to feel some sense of rapport and comfort with this person in the way we speak to each other. So that if I accidentally drop an F-bomb, am I going to, and of course, again, anyone who knows me knows there's nothing accidental about it. If I drop an F-bomb, am I dead meat? Like, am I in trouble? And I need to get, not that I would do it in an interview. Don't do it in an interview, people. Don't do it. But you should get a sense of who this person is. Do they laugh when you tell a joke? Do they smile when you say something? Do they give you physical clues that you are connecting to them in some way, shape, or form? So to me, I always interview for fit because I have been in a bad fit situation and you can't fix it. You can't fix a bad fit. If you work with a style or a behavior that your boss can't manage or your boss has one that you can't stand, it doesn't get better. I've taken jobs because I was like, okay, like I had an interview with somebody not that long ago who was like, so where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Retired is the answer. And she didn't think it was funny. And I didn't think it was funny that she asked me that because I'm interviewing for an executive level role. That is like something you ask somebody who's 25. So yeah. I should have known right then and there that we were going to have a problem. And it only became very clear. I did know that that was a weird question and it was a problem. And then later on, it became very clear how bad the fit really was after I was working with this person. So there are clues, you'll know. So look for fit, number one. Number one thing, fit.
Those people, and I think especially for people, who are looking for roles too, the fit, just that relationship, finding somebody, I know you've got people that have, you just said you've put people in roles and you've taken people with you and are very good about that. And I think that's something too for candidates to be mindful of, like, all right, well, where's the hiring manager going? Where's that relationship? Because you're putting your effort into this, and sometimes it's, not sometimes, a lot of times it's more of who you know and who you build those relationships that will help you, in your career. And I think you're great about rewarding people for that and kind of building those as well.
I do want to go back to the idea of fit because I want to be clear. They don't have to be like me because too many of me is a lot. One of me is a lot, but too many of me is way too many. Like 5 of me is even a lot for a team. So I do look for like intellectual curiosity, a willingness to learn and appreciate coaching and management. And again, my Bed Bath people will know every cliche that I spit out, but I used to talk about my island of misfit toys is who was my pricing team. And for a host of reasons, because they had come to me, some of them unwillingly, had landed on the pricing team. Instead of being laid off, they were like, oh, well, Barry needs bodies, so that person put them over there. And there was a lot of quirky personalities. Analytical types tend to be quirky. So it's not an insult. We're just different. Like we think differently. We relate to people differently. But always looking for that intellect, that curiosity, and wanting to learn and study. So when I'm hiring candidates, that's what I look for. But I also can tell when somebody's intellectually curious about what I'm saying, when someone's reacting and saying, I did not know that. And they learn something from you. So you want the same thing in the same things that you value. You want to see that in the people above you, not just in the people below you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's helpful because, it's more of like, okay, you're looking for somebody, at least in my perspective, looking for somebody you can get along with and you understand and you can kind of at least have that relationship with, and they don't necessarily, like you said, need to be exactly like you because that's not maybe the role you're filling. You may be filling a data scientist role or you may be filling something, but if those styles aren't going to go together, then it's just going to be a disaster for both sides. So, I think I've, most of my experience is on the B2B side, but, as far as the future of B2C pricing, I know there's a lot of talk about AI and all that kind of stuff. I mean, what are your thoughts on kind of the future of B2C pricing in the, let's just say near term? And I know we've talked about, there's a lot of softwares on the horizon. It seems like every time I look, there's a new retail pricing software company popping up.
Forgetting about all the software and the tech, I would say the most concerning thing that AI is going to do is disrupt your current model. And what I mean by that is AI can do something that no individual can do, which is they can get all that information for you. For a consumer can find a way. There will be tools that will do this. I'm probably giving someone the idea to go do it, but I'm sure they've already thought of it. There will be tools basically that scrape for a consumer. Instead of us hiring, large companies, we get scrapers to pull that data down. AI is going to be able to do that. There's going to be ways that AI will disrupt your current model in that I've always said to myself, under $20, are they really price checking before they go to the store? At this point, they're probably not, because it is too time consuming to type in 27 different places and decide where you're going to go. They do that when they're making major purchases, and really $20 and up. I don't even say it's thousands of dollars. I say it's like $20. If I walk into a store and I said, I'm going to go to, mass retailer A is who I picked. And if it's 50 cents more there than it is, or $2 more, I'm not getting in the car to drive someplace else. But there will be tools that will disrupt that thinking, which is going to mean you have to put your pricing energy around the items that your customers want and need the most. Instead of, there may not be, you can't have the $500 box of macaroni and cheese anymore. You're going to actually have to be really thoughtful about where you're putting your pricing energy, and that you've aligned the items your customers. First of all, who are those most valuable customers? What are the items that matter to them, and that you're priced right on those. It's actually backwards in time to like old school category management is what's going to have to happen, because I think tech is going to disrupt the ability to hide behind the confusion of what's out there.
That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it. I think there are some companies already trying to do that and making everybody's life harder, or maybe it's helping with reducing some of those prices, and instead of companies hiding behind a little bit of the increase.
And so I think that's one thing. I think, and I am going to talk about the B2B space. That's where I am now. So it's renewed energy around B2B. If your pricing model is based on a lack of transparency, that is not sustainable for long. Like if you're like, oh, well, they have to sign in to get the prices off my web, to get their prices for me. You can keep thinking that all you want to, but it will not be long before people will violate all of those rules and figure out ways to get around that. So if you continue to have a pricing model that's because nobody can see, they can't do it. They can't shop the way a consumer can shop. If you're based on that, and that's what your whole pricing model is based on, you have another thing coming to you, I'd say. And they talk about the pace at which it's changed. I've been threatening this to B2B since I was in distribution, saying this is But I actually feel like we're on the precipice of the fall, where with AI, they can do things that no human could have done it before, but the AI can now do it. So beware.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's interesting on the B2B side where, they've given out these horrible deals, and it's like, well, they're not, there's no worry in the space because they're like, well, the customers don't talk to one another, and, they don't want to, make any changes or, push on salespeople for
No. But the
over
salesperson's the greatest asset. This is a relationship business. Come on, Chris. It's a relationship business. There's a lot of that.
I always love that the number one reason that deals are lost is because of price. That's the number one.
Right, but it's a relationship business. But it's a relationship business. It's all about the relationship you have with this customer. They won't leave me because they love me. They don't love you 20% more than your competition. They might love you 3% more than your competition, but not 20. So.
We could probably go on and on about those stories. Any other thoughts from things we've talked about, or anything that may be top of mind with where we've kind of taken things?
Yeah, a couple things. One, I told you this right before we got on the call. I got a text from somebody who used to work for me, who I love dearly, who is having this moment of, I don't think I want to do this anymore, about a leadership role in pricing. I think it is really, really important that people in general, because I always wanted to be the CEO of whatever. I had career ambition of, I want to be the man. That's what I always wanted. And I did eventually reach the point where I realized I didn't want to be the man. I want to be the man behind the man. I'm the man I want to be the person who makes you look good. Because at every level you move up, you remove yourself from the work. So, and it's not just about going from individual contributor to manager, but your ability to be close to the work and have those breakthroughs the higher up you go, the further away you are from it. So be really thoughtful about what your career path should be, because you may find yourself hating what you do. You may say the money's great, except I'm miserable from the minute I wake up until the minute I go to bed. And then I have nightmares all night. So pretty much 24/7, I'm miserable because it's not the work you were meant to do. So, be aware and be thoughtful about, do you like leading teams? Do you actually like other people? Because you may not like other people very much, and decide that you want to be an individual contributor. There's no rule that says you have to keep moving up or you have to keep getting promoted and you have to get a VP title or chief title or whatever. For me, my rule, and in fact, this job that I'm in now at BFG Supply, I'm working with somebody I used to work with in a prior life. And the most important thing about it was that he hired me to do a job, not to tell me what to do. So even though I'm a chief now, which is very exciting, but and I'm above the work, I'm not really, because I'm building the functions and everything the way I want to do it. So I am not writing decks that I'm sending to investment to the board and for publication and to change the world. I'm doing the work that changes the world. So this is a really good fit for me, where I'm strategic, I'm leading people and transforming an organization, but I'm not being, squashed down on what I want to do, where it's just do another deck, please, another deck. And I'm going to change the fonts on your deck because I like blue. Okay. So
the board likes
be careful.
It this way.
Yeah. And I think, it takes some reflection and some time and some experience. And I did just have a nice career break where I did some consulting. And then I also had a minute to really reflect on what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I learned that what I wanted was to do my job, not to be told what to do. So I think for pricers who are analytically minded, you do need to be thoughtful around what is next for you. Because you can be a great individual contributor and be very, very successful as an individual contributor and have great satisfaction and financial success as well, because you're contributing to the P&L. So without being the boss. So don't think that's your only career path. Be thoughtful about what comes next. If you don't like people that much, the next level's not for you. Be an individual contributor, and you can do wonderful, wonderful things as an individual contributor. So, and then I will also, this is my line, I always say it. There is no more powerful tool in the toolbox or weapon in the arsenal than pricing to transform a company's P&L. Never, ever, ever forget that. You can drive the top line and you can drive the bottom line with the flick of a switch. Nothing's faster or more effective at doing it. Your work is critically important. So love your work, feel passionate about your work, because it's incredible what you can do. So, and if you don't think that you're there yet, I'm hiring. So, I'll show you how to do that. So it's really important, powerful work. And I get great satisfaction from doing it, even though technically I'm chief merchant. That's, way back in history for me. But my primary thing is going to be about how I'm going to tie merchandising into pricing to transform the P&L and use that weapon in the arsenal. That's the job.
Well, the first time I heard somebody I was kind of shocked when they went from VP back to manager. And I was like, why would you ever do that? She's like, Chris, I was just sitting in meetings all day. I wasn't actually doing anything. And it kind of made me think, okay, yeah, at some point, people like to, come back and actually do the work versus, just sitting in Zoom meetings all day or
doing what we're doing and talking.
Person.
Just chit-chatting all day. I feel a sense of satisfaction when I'm directly touching my work. I did a stint at a manufacturer. I was not in pricing then. I was doing category analytics with a manufacturer. And I was very unsatisfied with the job. The company was lovely. The people were lovely. It was all good. But because I never saw my execution happen, it was uncomfortable for me. It was a lot of, talking and not getting anywhere, trying to convince people to do something and very little follow through. Because I didn't own the asset. I didn't own the execution. All I could do was try to convince them. That was not satisfying for me for what I wanted to do. And again, I didn't know that at the time. I only knew it later when I moved into another job. And I was like, oh yeah, I meant to do this. This is what I need to do. So you have to be self-aware, and career advice for anybody, any career, be self-aware, know what makes you happy, know what frustrates you, and then get the percentages so that 80% is what makes you happy and 20% frustrates you, because it's never going to be perfect. Something's always going to aggravate you. There's no question.
The first few years that I did recruiting, anytime someone would turn down like an opportunity for a promotion, I'd be like, what the heck is wrong with this person? Like, you don't want more money? You don't want a better title? And then kind of over the years, I've stopped questioning that and more of complimenting the person of like, hey, if you found a great role, I'm very, very happy for you, and stay there if you're enjoying it, because, the grass isn't always greener. But it took me years to kind of like, what are these idiots doing? Why aren't they interested in the chat?
But it goes back to one of our favorite stories that you and I talk about, which again, we're not naming names, is there are times where you have an opportunity to go work for somebody you know and respect. And because it may not seem quite perfect, it's a little less money than you wanted to make or whatever, or you're looking for something different and you say no, you're always going to regret it. Like, better the devil you know. Like, so just it's important to think about that. So there was Chris and I have what we refer to as a famous example of it happening was, somebody who I knew and who didn't take the job. And we were both stunned that this person didn't take the job. And this person was really sorry they didn't, later. But at the time, it just was mind blowing. So sometimes, Chris, you're right. Why would you not take this job? Yeah. Knowing and liking the people you work with means more than anything. It's so much easier to get through when you know and trust the people you're working with.
Well, and I think that example, it would have almost been, an investment in the future, right? Like, I think far too many people worry about, oh, well, I need to go and either get to this next level or, are worried about the upward versus like, okay, maybe even just a lateral makes sense into a different space because the ceiling's higher, or this person that I could get this job with will be worth way more to me than anything else. And, I think the example we're talking about, he probably cost himself, 7 figures over that course of time based on what the next steps could have been. But I think far too many people focus not enough on the opportunity of that next job and the hiring manager, and they don't take enough into consideration when they're looking at a job opportunity, and kind of think through where their career path is. And I always try to tell my candidates, and when I interview people, I'm like, here would be my next step for you after this role, right? Like here's where it sets you up to go from here. Because if you're just focused on this role and like, oh, it's a great title, but you're not understanding what you want to do next, or, the opportunity internally. And, depending on who the hiring manager is, I'm like, okay, this opportunity getting really great with this VP or this person, and that's your objective for this role, is to work your butt off for the next 2 years and impress the heck out of this person. Or your goal is to go do this job, not get fired for 1.5 years, and then take another job to make more money. And I think people need to understand, what these different roles mean for them and what they should be doing to get where they want to go in their career, or not screw up a great opportunity.
Yeah, look, right before I took this job, I was interviewing with another very large retailer for a job. And it was a disgusting amount of money. I mean, really, it was disgusting, like in the most happy, disgusting way. Disgusting amount of money. And I walked the stores and I saw things in the stores, and then had a conversation with the hiring manager where I was like, I'm too old, I'm too tired, I can't. Like, it doesn't matter how much money it is. I could see that there were sacred cows that needed to be slayed, and like rounding rules and certain things that just as a pricer just gave me the heebie-jeebies. There were sacred cows that had to be slayed. And then when I spoke to the hiring manager and I said, I've had experience with a particular piece of software that you're contemplating buying. He didn't ask me my opinion. And I was like, this is all wrong. Like, this is just no amount of money could have made up for how miserable I would have been 30 days after I took the job. I would have been bright, shiny. I would have been a drop the mic kind of a job on my, on my resume. Like, I am here, boom. And everybody would have been like, oh, snap. But couldn't do it. Didn't matter how much money, how sexy, how much it stroked my ego. I knew it was a horrible fit in terms of the things that don't bring me joy. It would have been like literally going backwards in time in the crazy machine. I just couldn't do it. I just knew it.
Well, I think that's one of those red flags that we were talking about interviewing earlier. Like, if a company is buying the software before they're hiring the pricing professional, like that should be a big red flag. Like, why on earth is this
red flag?
This person's decision? I'm hiring this person. They should be telling us what to use. And I think far too often, and I think maybe that's why a lot of the software companies, and we won't name names, don't really care about the pricing community, because they're going after the C-level folks, because that's who has the budget and who are making the decision regardless. And I've heard countless stories where even, there's a deal that's made and software is acquired and it's given to a VP of pricing, like, hey, we got you this new software that they didn't even ask for or want, but they made some reciprocal deal and they were just handed a multi-million-dollar software engagement that they now had to risk their career with.
Yeah. So it's there are red flags everywhere. I think talking to the pricing community, I think the pricing community is exceptionally active on LinkedIn. I see lots of names of people who are very freely sharing advice and thoughtfulness about what they want to do. I share advice freely about what do you want to do. I believe pricing as a specialty is incredibly viable for a long, fruitful, profitable career. You can change a company. So if you can change a company, then you can change your own trajectory with that. So take advantage of this community that's out there. Because I think everybody's pretty open. Nobody just says, I won't talk to you. I've never seen anybody. I mean, maybe it's happening behind the scenes, but I've never had a person who I sent a post to or a comment to who didn't want to have a conversation with me and want to share it. And so, people, who write articles, there's professors at international universities that I've gotten to know from just reaching out and having conversations. So it's a very kind sharing community. I think because we are all misfits on the island of misfit toys. And we know how hard the job is. And it's a very, very difficult, it's not an easy job under any circumstances, but it's incredibly rewarding. At least for me, it is really rewarding to, at the end of the day, be like, what'd you do today? Well, I made my company $1 million. What'd you do today? I flipped a burger. Okay, you flipped a burger. Great. I'm glad my burger's ready, but it's not what I want.
I think that's a great point. I think everybody is very, very welcoming. I think a lot of people don't, and maybe you can shed light on this, don't ask the prior person in the role. Like, should I be taking this role? What do I need to know? And every pricing person under the sun would be like, oh yeah, here's who to watch out for. Like, they're not going to get mad if you succeeded in a role that they left, or, maybe they even weren't successful. They don't want you going in and taking a role and not being successful. We all understand sometimes it takes a few pricing people to get, the
right pricing person.
Or just it takes enough people telling them something to finally get the point across of like, okay, this is the third pricing person we've hired, and now we're finally going to listen.
And actually, we saw that in the chat, in some of the responses somebody had posted. I don't remember who it was, had said that I can't tell you how many times I've taken a job and then met the person who had the job before me and been like, yeah, dude, everything we do is based on your work. And I know you were really unsatisfied, but thanks for doing all that great work so that I could get credit for it. Like, really appreciate it. Yeah, you're right. It does happen that way for sure.
There's some instances I know of that, and too, where people have, they've up leveled and done all this stuff, and they now have a team, and it's just like they're using the original stuff until because it takes a while to get, especially in the B2B side of things, to get stuff, get stuff moving. And it's one that the question that came up the other day to me is like, how do we take the pricing function out of just, maybe to use your analogy, the land of misfit toys, but how do we come together to maybe bring it to the level of another space? And I don't have the right answer to that question of what do we need? And, not that I don't like PPS, but I don't think there's enough that's been done to kind of elevate the pricing world to get us the credit, even though we should be capitalizing now with PE firms and other places bringing pricing into their playbook. We're kind of, I don't know.
Yeah,
I may post this question to everybody.
I think it's the hard part is that the unicorn requirement is very high. So it is very, very difficult to be a successful pricer and not be technical. And if you are too technical and you speak in a technical way, you'll lose your audience, because a lot of these guys, they're surface level. And so how do you create the sound bites and show them and document sort of what you've done? I think you're right. PE firms have figured out that pricing is a great tool. And they've started to be thoughtful around placing pricing as a strategic point of excellence in their portfolio. So they'll plot their pricing person around from place to place. I think you're starting to see that. But how do you get the credit for it? I think it's always going to come down to, do you have a leader who is willing to take a minute and digest the magnitude of the work that goes into deciding whether or not the price should be $17.69 or $19.99, because it is a big piece of work to make that decision. And it's never as simple as raise prices. It's just never that simple. So you have to have leadership that has either deference to expertise or a willingness to get into the nitty gritty, which it's very rare that you're going to have leaders that have, and I mean C-suite executive leaders who want to do it. And I can tell you that the reason I'm in this role is because I made this person a lot of money once, and he knows I will make them a lot of money. So that gets me, they remember that. And he also knows that I know what to do. So I don't know what it's going to take. But I don't think you're ever going to see a pricer as a CEO. I don't think we're ever going to become that, unless it's a pricing software company or consulting company, then they'll be the CEO. But I don't know that you'll see a pricer end up taking over retail because of the nature of being a unicorn to make it happen, where you have to be technical and speak the business. It's so rare.
I think there may be one. I want to say I'm connected with a CEO at Best Buy. I don't know if she did a small rotation in pricing for a little while and then did other stuff and then went up, and she may not be there anymore. I don't kind of follow everything too closely, but I think there may have been a few people that have done pricing for a little while and then gone into other stuff and worked
and said, thank God there's people who do that for a living and I don't have to. But I don't. I mean, you're right. It could be, but I don't think you'll see a bunch of technical pricers running, as CEOs of I just don't see it, because I think the nature of the roles are so distinctly different, and that would be, the unicorn of all unicorns, to have somebody who could be a CEO and be a really great pricer. I almost think it's mutually exclusive, but what do I know?
There is a push for kind of the consulting experience and that type of communication style to be more successful with the C-level. At least that's kind of becoming one of the more prevalent skills that these companies are looking for, regardless of pricing experience, which in some cases is, like we talked about, is not the right fit for the person and for the company, and something to kind of, be careful of. It's been great catching up, and I really appreciate the time. I think like Barry said, we're both very open to, if you've got questions or comments, and you can put them in the video or reach out to me, and I'm happy to kind of share them with Barry or follow her on LinkedIn as well. So, thank you for the time, and I always enjoy our chats.
Yep. Thanks, Chris. Great to catch up.
Thank you.
Bye.